guys, what's going on? It is British Open week, or the Open Championship as it's also referred to. I am super pumped. One of the best parts of this, I think, is sweating golf in the morning. So things are going to tee up super early this week, which is why I'm getting out a lot of this content a little bit earlier than I normally do. So we're going to try and jam pack a lot into the next, say, 20 minutes or so. I want to basically do an overview of the course, key stat identification, and I've already teed up a model for us to look at. So we can start taking a look at, potentially who we might want to bet on this week, who fits this course. We'll see in a second. It's going to play really challenging. So there are certain golfers that have certain skill sets that are going to lend itself well for us this week. In addition to that, like I said, we'll go through the model. We'll talk about the betting board. And then tomorrow I'll put out more of a DraftKings specific video. So the idea is, there's going to be some pretty high ownership on certain folks. How should we construct our lineups? How do we best set ourselves up? There is a Millie Maker this week, so we'll definitely be entering that. We'll talk a little bit about strategy there as well. So that's the idea. But first, before we get into any of that, I did just want to highlight the John Deere Classic. Just a super quick recap. We're not going to go into all the stats because I want to talk about the British Open. But man, did we have a sweat yesterday. So Adam Schenk gave us some hope there for a second. So he was actually the solo outright leader with 6 holes to play. And then, no pun intended, he shanked a tee shot on the short par 4. It hit a cart path that shot maybe 50 yards beyond the green. He couldn't get up and down, so while everyone else was making birdie on that hole, he ended up making a bogey. So, basically did him in right there. He, shanked another drive on the next hole, the par 5, and then he just completely whiffed on one out of the rough and didn't make contact. It was a complete disaster, but he gave us hope there for a second. So at 190 to 1. We'll take it. He's definitely a guy that I think can win. I mean, he hasn't played well. Is certainly not in the stronger fields. He's generally a safer guy, good for like a top 50, make the cut, get through. But I think it's interesting that our model was able to identify a few guys like that. Ches Reavie was another. He ended up finishing, I think, tied for 11th. We had a couple other guys make a run on Sunday, but too little, too late. So Harold Varner, Patton Kazire, they came up the leaderboard as well. So we actually, I think, overall, again, process over results. Like, we bet on roughly, 10 guys, and I think 5 of them finished in the top 20 or so. So usually you have a little bit more kind of confidence going in, but I think overall we should be feeling pretty good about ourselves in the process, especially to have someone at 190 to 1 to finish as strong as he did. And a viable strategy, if you guys wanted to take this approach, I don't do this a lot, but you can back some of these outrights up, especially the crazy ones with the top 5. They usually have odds that, especially guys that are like 190 to 1. Guys that have, that deep of odds generally have maybe like a 20 to 1, 15 to 1 kind of top 5. So even, had we done that in this situation, we would have came out feeling pretty good. I don't generally like to do that. I'd rather take a couple more shots on outright. So again, it's just kind of a betting strategy. It's totally viable. You could reduce the number of guys you're betting, but go after, maybe top 5s, top 10s in addition to the outrights. And then that way you're not leaving yourself disappointed. But for me, I'd rather just take a few more bullets in terms of the outright market. I'm kind of an all or nothing guy, if you can't tell that by now. So anyway, just a quick recap of the John Deere Classic. So again, it was a really solid event. Lucas Glover ended up taking the thing down. He went absolutely beast mode on the last 4 or 5 holes. He made 4 straight birdies. So he definitely earned it. He's a guy who didn't win on tour. I think it's been maybe 10 years since he last won on tour. So kind of long overdue for a guy that won a major. So good for him. He's a guy I just never get right anytime I use him. So we live, we learn, we move on to the next one. So in that vein, let's jump right into the British Open. So what I've teed up, basically, again, just trying to identify guys and skill sets that we think can play well. So this year's Open Championship, British Open's being played at Royal St. George's. It is a full-on links style course, not like your American style links courses. This is true links golf where you have a lot of an undulation in the fairways and hills. You have the deepest bunkers that you'll probably ever see in your life. Relatively small greens, but with a lot of kind of elevation changes to them. So it's going to be a challenge for folks. This is not going to be a birdie fest. This is not going to be 21 under par. This is going to be like 4 or 5 under par, probably takes it down. And maybe at most, right? So we haven't seen this course since 2011, I believe, when Darren Clark out of nowhere ended up winning it. So it's been a while. DJ actually finished second that year for what it's worth. So anyway, so that's kind of what we're up against. The greens are bent grass, so we're going to be looking at that as well. Just in terms of the scorecard, so this is a course that it's a par 70. It's fairly long for a par 70. So we're going to want to look at mid-range, long irons. So this isn't going to be a wedge fest or anything like that. But I will say, just looking back at some historical trends, green regulation percentage at this course in particular, and in general for the Open Championships, is very low relative to PGA Tour standards. I think we're looking at like a 50% green regulation percentage. So for me, yes, you need to be elite from a ball striking perspective, but even the best ball strikers this week are going to miss greens. They're going to need to get up and down to safe par. Guys that cannot do that are going to struggle. You also cannot hit bunkers. If you do that, you're going to be making bogeys for sure. Maybe depending on if you get a good lie or not, but these things are monsters. And I'm pretty sure, just again, looking at some historical data, when Darren Clark won this thing, I think he hit 4 bunkers all week. So you really can't be in there. You're going to be in trouble. There are some holes that I think are birdie holes, and there are some short par 4s that maybe you can get aggressive on, but if you screw up, you could be looking at double bogey. The rough is going to be super thick as well. So all of this to say, there's a premium on accuracy, but I think even more so for me, I'm putting a lot of emphasis on around the green this week. So kind of, again, just looking at the scorecard, key stat overview, going to be mid-range, long-range irons, strokes gained approach, strokes gained off the tee, the typical things you want to see. Guys that hit it further in these conditions are going to have a lot more of an advantage, but there's still going to be a lot of greens that are missed, so you got to be able to get up and down or you're going to be in trouble. And the guys that do that the best are going to be the ones that end up competing. So that's a little bit of the scorecard, kind of an overview of the course. I'll put this in the link to the video, but Golf Digest put out a video on, it's basically a flyover of Royal St. George's. So if you want to get a sense for what this is going to look like, look how deep these things are, right? Like these bunkers are absolutely brutal. And you can see this is pure link style golf. You have a lot of undulations, hills in the fairways, a lot of elevation changes to get to the greens. This is going to be a challenge for folks, right? So this is going to be a week where, we're not going to be wanting to take 150 to 1, 200 to 1 guys, right? That was last week. So this week, we got to anchor on guys that have elite skill sets in these particular areas. So for me, I'm going to be just allocating more dollars to fewer guys. We're going to be looking at, probably that, I'll say 30 to 60, maybe 30 to 70 to 1 range is probably where I'm going to have a lot of exposure. But I'm also not going to be surprised if someone like Jon Rahm takes this thing down at 6 to 1, right? So that's kind of the attitude you have to have going in. Be prepared for one of the truly elite players in the world to take this thing down. But I think there are guys that have very strong skill sets that can contend here. So that's what we're going to lean into, and that's hopefully what we're going to be able to identify. So again, just a little bit of a preview of this. I'll put the link in the description to the video, but it's definitely something that, again, as we're kind of building the models, we want to make sure we're taking a look at the softer side of this as well to help identify those stats. So yeah, look at these things. If you hit these bunkers out of the fairway, you are not going to have a chance. Maybe this hole in particular is not the best example, but there's a lot of potential for bogeys and doubles. There are some holes that par is going to be a very good score. So we just have to recognize that, lean into that going in, and don't be shocked if you have guys that you took early and a couple of them come out of the gate, 1 over 2 over par. I think the first hole is one of the most challenging on the whole golf course. So just be prepared, kind of brace yourselves. This is not going to be like birdie fest, birdie streaks kind of week, right? This is going to be a course where we really need to make sure we're dialed in with our irons, be accurate off the tee, And again, we're going to miss greens. It's just going to happen. Wind tends to play a factor in these types of courses too, right? So your traditional link style Euro golf course, wind is definitely going to be a factor. There's no trees out here to kind of slow things down. So you're going to miss greens. It's going to happen, and you got to be ready for that. And you got to bring elite around the game, around the green game to be able to contend here. So let's jump over to the model that I have built so far. So basically what I've done, and again, I'm not 100% done with this, but I'm putting a lot of weight on around the green this week. So I've got it up to about 25% of my model. Again, you got to get up and down. Par is a good score sometimes. Got to lean into that. The other thing I'm putting in here is off the tee, because I think distance and accuracy, kind of either or, ideally both, the combination of those things is going to be an advantage too, because the closer you are, even if you miss a fairway, like you're going to have a shorter distance into the green. So a lot of weight on that one as well. And then I've also brought in strokes gained approach overall. I've brought in proximity from 150 to 175, 175 to 200. I think these are going to be your most common distances this week. So Fantasy National, obviously, that's what we're using for this. They don't have the kind of historical data. This course is, the last time it was used was 2011. There's nothing to really lean on in terms of your key kind of approach distances and things like that we typically lean on. So we're kind of doing some mental math with the scorecard. So I think your longer hitters are going to be more in this 150 to 175 range. Your shorter hitters, and even to some extent the longer hitters, if they decide to club down, they're going to be in this 175 to 200 range. So to me, those are your key proximity distances. On approach, it's kind of the combination of things, but over the last 36 rounds, how are folks getting it done? Obviously, with bent grass greens, I want to make sure we're putting some weight on that, because I think that is important this week. And then lastly, I brought in strokes gained tee to green in two kind of scenarios. The first is just historical experience on link style golf courses. So a lot of it is US style, but it does have some historical open experience, open championship experience. But courses like even Kiowa, where the US Open was just played, courses like Whistling Straits, Erin Hills, things like that, even like Pebble Beach, which is kind of coastal conditions, closest you're going to get to link style golf here in the US. So I brought in historical tee to green experience on those types of courses over the last 36 rounds or so. And then in addition to that, one of the nice features of Fantasy National is that playing conditions kind of get categorized, right? So I brought in strokes gained tee to green on difficult playing conditions. So that kind of takes into account basically average scoring relative to par. So if it's fairly difficult, the average is maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 over par, right? Like how are folks doing in those situations? So when you do that, you basically get this sort of rank order breakdown. So Patrick Cantlay, Paul Casey, Jordan Spieth are actually your top 3 golfers. So for me, one bet, I haven't made it yet, but I'm probably going to be betting Patrick Cantlay. I don't think that's an uncommon thing to do this week. He obviously won at the Memorial, but some of that was more of a function of Jon Rahm withdrawing and him being allowed to get back into the mix, even though he's technically down by 6 heading into that thing. But the guy just plays well on a lot of these types of courses. He's in good form. His around the green is solid. Same thing for Paul Casey. The thing that separates him, though, is that he can't putt. So that's kind of the difference between Casey and Cantlay. So Casey is a guy that, again, I think their odds are very similar. Casey has shown up very well in majors of late. He just hasn't brought the putter. Now, he never does that, but if he does happen to do that this week, he's probably going to be in a good spot. Yeah, so the next guy to take a look at then, and I don't think this is an uncommon take either, but Jordan Spieth rates out extremely well in this model. Now, I'm seeing in some places, just maybe flipping back and forth to the odds, he's currently 19 to 1 on DraftKings. I think he's roughly that on Fanduel. If I'm taking one guy at the top, it's probably going to be him, but it's also not an uncommon thing, right? So he's obviously playing really well coming into this. He plays well in these types of courses. He's won a Claret Jug before. He's won an Open Championship before. So that all helps him a lot. It just comes down to, is he going to be so popular? This may be more of a consideration on DraftKings. He may be extremely popular. from a betting perspective, I don't think you care as much. So I'm probably going to set up my card to basically, grab a couple guys at the top end, and then a bunch of folks in that, like, again, 30 to 50, 30 to 60 range, and then maybe a couple long shots. One guy in particular that falls into that category. So guys like Jason Day, Ricky Fowler are a little bit deeper, so I may take shots on those guys. So anyway, so that's kind of the top three coming out of this model. Then you got Rahm and JT. Hideki is withdrawn. He has COVID still, so he won't be playing, or he tested positive anyway. So Rahm and JT, Rahm is obviously, in my mind, you either play Rahm and you just throw all your money there, or you go elsewhere. I'm not going to do that. He's only, I think, 6 or 7 to 1 at this point. He's 8 to 1 now, so they're trying to get some juice on him, I guess. But he obviously rates out extremely well. JT, the one thing that scares the hell out of me with him, like his around the green is great. He can get kind of erratic off the tee. That's problematic here. The other thing is he's just not as good of a putter as some of these other guys. So something that I definitely want to think about. He's also kind of priced down in this 20 to 1 or so range. So it's something to think about for sure. I could totally see him coming out and playing well, but for me, I might lean on some of these other guys. Patrick Reed is a guy that I think is also really interesting. I don't think a ton of people are on him. His around the green game, super strong. The thing that scares everyone has kind of a flaw here, right? His is probably his iron play and his proximity. You see he's kind of dead last in the key proximity distances, but he's also a guy that can make up for it with the putter, right? So he may not be hitting it as close, but he's a guy that can drain 20 footers. He can get it up and down. Like, that kind of skill set has a lot of weight here. So I think guys like Patrick Reed are really interesting to me. Rory's a little bit further down the board. Again, like, he's won a Claret Jug. I will probably have some of him in fantasy. I'm not sure I can get there to bet him this week. Keegan Bradley is a guy that I like as a value play more than anything. He's someone that is in good form. He hasn't maybe performed as well in these like difficult courses and link style courses as the other guys, but he's got the right skill set to do it. He can't putt, but I think to some extent putting is mitigated a little bit this week because it's not a birdie fest, right? Like, if you're consistently getting up and down, hitting greens in regulation, par is a good score in a lot of holes. So you don't need to necessarily be rolling in every single one for birdie. So I think to some extent, like, just the conditions neutralize putting a bit for folks. So he may be a guy that we just take a YOLO flyer on. I don't even know what his odds are right now, but let's see. I think you have to go pretty deep to find him. Let's see. Let's just find him. Yeah, so he's at 110 to 1 right now. So he's a guy that I think could be pretty interesting. Just because he's rating out so well in the model. Another guy that has fairly deep odds. So Shane Lowry actually won this last time. This was actually, not to brag, but he was on my card the last time that this was played. Wasn't played last year because of COVID, but in 2019. That was really fun. That was really cool to see. I think he ended up winning by like 4 or 5 shots. Kind of in his home course. So that was really cool to see. I don't know if it makes sense to go back to him here from an outright perspective. I think he can definitely play well. He'd probably be in my fantasy lineups. I'm not sure I can bet him to kind of go back to back. But he is rating out fairly well. So use that as you see fit. I think his number is just a little short. I like some other guys in that range a little bit better. Daniel Berger is a guy that is super interesting to me. So number one in this field in proximity from the key distances. He can putt. He hasn't done it of late, but he's typically pretty solid around the green. I think he could be very live here, and his odds, I think at the moment, so I think, yeah, he's down to 55 on DraftKings, but shop around because I think he's 70 maybe on Fanduel. He's a guy I'll be taking a little bit further down the board. And then you get into the guys that just historically play well in majors. So guys like Louis Oosthuizen. Oh, sorry, I don't want to skip over Matt Wallace. I think he's a guy that you can take a shot on this week too. So certainly for fantasy. Let's see. I'm not sure what his current odds are, but I guess he's 100 to 1. So he's a guy that's played well of late. He's a guy that sets up well for these types of courses. This is what he grew up playing. So he's definitely a guy that I'm going to consider for my betting card as kind of a deeper guy. Then you get into the guys that have historically played well in majors. You got guys like Louis Oosthuizen. He's won his only major that he didn't finish second in was a British Open. So he's definitely interesting to me. I don't know if I can get there at 30-1 because he just doesn't knock the door down. Tony Finau is a guy that always plays well in majors. He has the right skill set. He just kind of looked like crap the past couple events heading into this, but he's definitely a guy that is interesting to me. And then you get into, so Brooks Koepka, Xander Schauffele are not rating out the best in terms of the models. Do with that what you want. These guys always seem to show up in majors, right? So I think they're definitely very interesting. Brooks in particular, because he actually wins. Again, like I think he's played well in similar types of courses. He's won at Shinnecock. He's won at Erin Hills. Those were his U.S. Open. So like, this type of course, again, it's not really apples to apples, but his skill set does play here for sure. And Xander's been playing well. He played well at the Scottish Open this past week as well as his kind of primer for this. So again, he's another guy that I think you can look at. It's just if you're trying to separate and kind of pick, right? Like to me, like these guys at the top are just rating out so much better, but this is golf. These guys know how to play. They know how to get it done in these types of events. They're definitely worth considering. Then you get into some other guys that I'm interested in. I don't think I'm going to bet them, but Harris English, in theory, has a solid skill set for this. And then you get back to our guy, Guido Migliozzi. He's played well. I think I forget where he placed in the Scottish Open, but I'm pretty sure he played well there as well. So these are, some guys that you can look at from a DraftKings perspective. We'll talk about more of that tomorrow. And then you get to DJ. DJ is really interesting to me. So as of right now, he's the number 1 ranked player in the world. He is currently, 20? That's the Masters. Whoops. So where is he? DJ, I believe, is 22-1, which is kind of crazy to me that there's so many guys priced ahead of him. Yeah, he's 22.5-1. He's the number 1 player in the world, and he finished second here at this event in 2011. There are very few guys in this field that have experience here. That might be a just don't regret it later kind of bet. He's obviously rating out somewhat decent in terms of the stats. He hasn't been as strong, certainly not with the irons, but he's a guy that can flip a switch too. We've seen that in the past where he's kind of one event going out there shooting 80 and then the next event winning it by 6 strokes. So he's a guy that I think, again, I haven't solidified exactly what I'm doing yet this week, but he's a guy, again, maybe I just take him and Spieth at the top. Casey Cantlay kind of in the middle, Reed, right? Grab Tony Finau, Daniel Berger, and then 2 flyers, and then that's the card, right? So try and keep it around 3 units again or so for the week. That's entirely a viable strategy. The next guys I think are also interesting. So Scotty Scheffler is a solid around the tee game. He's a Texas guy. So, the winds, these conditions probably are not new to him. Obviously playing overseas is. But he also played really well at the Scottish Open last week. He's a guy coming in decent form. Not sure exactly how he got it done last week because there's no strokes gain data for those events, but certainly someone to take a look at. 2 guys that I do want to talk about. So Colin Morikawa, Victor Hovland. These guys are absolutely elite ball strikers, but they cannot get up and down. And Colin continues to, his weakness is always his putter. Again, I think that is somewhat neutralized. If he ends up, maybe field average is 56% greens in regulation. He ends up somehow hitting 70, maybe he has a shot, right? And he can do that because he is basically a machine with his irons. Same thing for Victor Hovland. Now, Hovland's been actually improving a little bit in terms of around the green, but not to the level you need to be at. So, for me, these guys I think they are good enough to contend. So Victor Hovland just won the BMW Championship overseas. So these guys can get it done, right? These are proven winners. I'm just not sure that the Open Championship is the right course for their skill set. So I'll probably be taking a pass on those guys. Matthew Fitzpatrick is another guy I like. Same with Tommy Fleetwood. Like, I think these guys, again, if you can find a good number on them, I like them. I think, again, they're obviously Euros. They're Englishmen. They know what they're doing in these types of courses. Their skill sets are exactly, what they need to be successful here, right? So they're two guys that they're rating a little bit further down the model. Matthew Fitzpatrick just lost in a playoff at the Scottish Open, so like he's in obviously really good form. So he'd be someone I'd be taking a really close look at here as well. So him, Fleetwood, for sure. And I don't know that I would go too much further down this, right? Like I think you could take some bombs. So like a couple guys that I've starred, Alex Noren, typically plays well in difficult conditions. Matt Kuchar. Some of these guys are just kind of cheaper cheaper DraftKings plays. Christian Bezuidenhout might not win, but he's a guy that maybe consider adding to your player pool. Cam Smith has a strong skill set for this as well. I think, again, to me, like he might be just a little too erratic off the tee, but he has, in theory, the right skill set. But believe it or not, he hasn't really played well in these kind of difficult conditions and link-style courses in the past. So something to think about. I'm not going to bet him, but someone I might be considering mixing in on DraftKings. So that's the model. Again, so maybe just to recap over with the betting board, I'm going to be looking at maybe two of these big names at the top, maybe two or three of these mid-range, kind of 30 to 50 to 1 type guys, and then a couple guys maybe further down the board. One guy we didn't talk about, but I will probably bet him just because I grew up with this guy and I will kind of always have a soft spot in my heart for him. But Ricky Fowler is playing really well coming into this. He has been absolute trash probably for the better part of a couple months, but he's been really strong. He missed one cut in there, but has been gaining on approach. It looks like his putter's coming back. So like for all of these reasons, I'm going to be throwing Ricky Fowler on my betting card. I'm pretty sure, on DraftKings, he is sitting there at currently 85 to 1. So just kind of an old school play for me, but he is rounding back into form, and he does have good Open Championship experience as well. So that's it for me for now. Again, I'll throw out some of these links in the description of the video. Check them out. But in terms of the model, again, you just need to be able to get up and down. You need to be accurate with your, off the tee and with your irons. And obviously being able to putt on bent grass helps folks not bleed too many strokes. You definitely can't be bleeding strokes on the greens or around the greens this week. So I'm putting a lot of emphasis on that. And then in terms of the betting strategy, just grab a couple of big names at the top. Right now, my lean is Spieth and DJ, but that could change. And then grab a couple of these guys in like the 30 to 40 range. Guys like Cantlay, Fitzpatrick, Casey, Reed, Finau. Probably not all of these guys, but a couple of them. And then further down the board, grab like a Ricky Fowler, grab like a Keegan who's rating out pretty well. And then maybe like a Matt Wallace who's rating out pretty well as well. So guys like that. So that's it for me. Stay tuned for a DraftKings update tomorrow. We'll go through kind of lineup construction, ownership, all of the things to be considering there. Think about Millie Maker strategy, things like that, and hopefully get you guys the information you need to be successful this week well ahead of Wednesday. So lineups, again, everything locks in, I think in like the middle of the night on Wednesday. So be prepared for that. That's why this stuff's coming a little bit early. So stay tuned for more. But until then, have a fantastic day. Hopefully this is helpful. As always, like the video, subscribe to my channel if you thought this was useful, and we will talk soon. Thanks, guys.